Well, hello, hello. Good morning. This is Mick, the Doctor of Digital, and I'm coming to you, of course, from Mastering Presentation Secrets. And today, what we have for you, the 12 stages of the hero's journey, especially looking at Burning America and the best interests of the children. And that, of course, is available on Amazon. It's at the bottom of your screen, and you also can hear that and see that again. Because what we're going to do today is go over all of the 12 steps of the hero's journey, or as much as we have for the next hour. And then what we'll see is we'll follow up and come back to this, because what I want to do is to make sure that you know how the hero's journey works and how this can improve your creative writing. Now, of course, if you need any help or assistance, go to my private Facebook group, Mastering Presentation Secrets, and I can help you become a better writer, presenter, or use any type of written or oral communication that will assist you and help you out. So without further ado, of course, what I want to do is to make sure that we're going to and being able to understand what are the 12 stages of the hero's journey, according to Joseph Campbell. Because what he's been able to do, of course, is to show for a lot of creative writers how this really takes place in so many different ways. And for a writer, you need some sort of structure. And that's what I help people with on Mastering Presentation Secrets. You need to know structure, not just enough to write a book, but it's also to know how to write a book. And that's what I can help with. So we can strengthen your writing. Use Joseph Campbell's 12 stages to guide your creative writing, and contact me at Mastering Presentation Secrets, and I can help you with stage one. Now, when you start out your story, it's the ordinary world, the first stage. The ordinary world happens to be one of the most essential elements of any story, even ones that don't follow the 12-stage structure to a T, because what some writers do is they take bits and pieces of the stages. What I've tried to do with Burning America is have all 12 of them, but you want to be able to have that structure. But I'm going to give you 3 reasons why writers need to show protagonists in their ordinary world. And that's where we begin a story. You want to set up the conflict and how this disrupts the character's ordinary life. So we see the character in ordinary life, happy life, everything's fine, peachy keen. And you open up the story within the character's ordinary world. You're establishing their comfort zone, a world that they're complacent with or used to living. But of course, this is not how things go. So, for example, what I want to show you in Burning America, Paul is our protagonist, and he is going to be immediately confronted with a conflict. And that's really what we want people to be able to see. Our protagonist is viewed feeding an infant. Now, this is a little bit odd, right? A father is feeding an infant. Isn't that usually someone else? But a father and a man is feeding an infant. How many men or fathers have that opportunity? But this is Paul's world. This is his ordinary world, because he's a primary caregiver to Paul and Anne's, his wife, daughter. So Paul and Anne are married, and the daughter is being fed by Paul. And this is what we see. So Don't Leave Home Without It is chapter 1 of the novel, introduces us to Paul. This is the peaceful world that he enjoyed as a primary caregiver. Stage 1, the beautiful and colorful child's room Katrin, the daughter, enjoyed. And in the novel, you'll see there are like butterflies and birds and all kinds of great things. Number 2, the second reason, to foreshadow the story to come. The ordinary world at the beginning offers the writer a chance to foreshadow what's to come, to plant the plot and the character devices that will pay off later in the story, and we're introducing them early on. It allows the opportunity to present themes and metaphors that will be explored later on within the narrative. And in this case, in Burning America, the court, the custody industry, and the village of neighbors award Paul custody. How do they see him? Well, he's a primary caregiver, so shouldn't Paul get the child? Well, we'll see. The question is, and that's in the subtitle, do the courts act in the best interest of the children? These are themes that are going to be explored, and we already are being introduced to them early on in stage 1. Since the daughter is torn, some would say kidnapped by Anne, the mother, will the courts, the village neighbors, and the system advocate for the child? Shouldn't the child just be returned to the marital home? Will Paul be able to restore their daughter to home and school? And of course, will Katrin be able to enjoy her first Holy Communion? Because this is a Holy Communion age child. It's a young child. Third reason, to create catharsis and empathy. So, in a cinematic interpretation of catharsis, which you could read the novel, it is a novel written by Catharsis. It's translated as a feeling we feel after the resolution of the story and the protagonist's overall journey. And that comes back at the very end, of course, with stage 12. We'll view Paul experiencing the trauma of separation and ultimate resolution as the audience identifies with him and emphasizes with his plight because they see him in the ordinary world. He's a primary caregiver. But we have a long way to go, but the conflict and trauma will tear Paul from his happy home, stage 1, and will have to fight to restore and reconcile the child with the home and school. And chapter 1 is entitled Don't Leave Home Without It, and it originates from a commercial. So for some of you that don't remember this one, I'm just going to play it. It's a short.
You know me. Without my clarinet, a lot of people don't. That's one reason I need the American Express card. This machine's another. I put my card in here, punch my special number, and I can get up to $500 in American Express traveler's checks at major airports all around the country. After all, even the King of Swing can use some extra loot.
To apply for a card, call 800-528-8000.
The American Express card. Don't leave home without it.
Don't leave home without it. And some of you might not know who Benny Goodman is, but of course he's a famous American jazz musician. So that's chapter 1, and that's the entitle, and that's where it comes from. This is American Express first advised consumers that they shouldn't leave home without them in 1975, and that's when cars have things like this, all these plastic things that we're now familiar with. Slogan was originally used to promote American Express travelers' checks, and the commercials featured Academy Award-winning actor Carl Malden, which didn't show this one, but that's in one, and also Roger Daltrey. Who was Roger Daltrey and what band is he from? Oh, yeah, The Who. He also taped a version of the ad. So Burning America in the best interest of the children. Now, I also want to move on to stage 2. And this is a long clip. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but what you can see, of course, is if you get a hold of me at Mastering Presentation Secrets, I have videos for each one of these stages, stage 1 through 12 of the hero's journey in Burning America. And you can enjoy those at your leisure as well, but they are available. All right, stage 2 is the call to adventure. So something is going to happen. So we saw stage 1, ordinary world, protagonist says everything is okay. Now stage 2 comes. That's the call to adventure. The hero is faced with an event, a conflict, a problem, or a challenge that makes them begin their adventure. And you also want to start out a story because a lot of people have this wrong way of viewing long work, such as a novel. And they say, I've got to build up the story. I've got to eventually get there. No, you really don't want to do that at all. You want to do what's called in media res. In media res means in the midst of. So it means that all of a sudden, stage 2 is an event, a conflict, or problem where all of a sudden we're drawn into the story and the protagonist is pulling us along with us. Because I'm going to give you 3 reasons why the call to adventure means everything when you want to tell a story. Number 1, it introduces the core concept of the story. Concept is very crucial to the success. It's the sole reason why anyone would even bother reading your story or watching a movie or a television plot. It represents the core of the story and affects each and every character that you create. And that is what you're drawing him into. And I can't emphasize this enough with this next sentence. Conflict is everything to a great story. So I'll give you an example. I had someone read the novel before it was published, and the editor was looking at it and I go, well, this is not supposed to happen. And that does, yeah, I know. But see, that's the whole point. Conflict, conflict, conflict. Call to adventure represents that conflict and what pushes the core conflict onto your protagonist. So whenever you're writing a story, think conflict, because if you don't have a conflict, people aren't going to be interested and they don't want to read and they don't want to get involved with the protagonist. Paul is faced with a problem, kidnapping, and takes off with the child. And this parental alienation rocks his ordinary world we saw in stage 1 and has to decide, well, what am I going to do? Do I roll over and play dead? Or do I fight back? Number 2, it defines the genre of your story. So the call of adventure can come in many forms. It can be usually defined the genre that you're writing in, which is another vital aspect of what you're doing. Knowing your genre is important, and that knowledge will allow you to use or avoid all the genre's cliches and tropes. It allows you to develop the perfect context and the narrative. The tone and the atmospheres will be better defined because you'll know your genre as well. The reader, when they understand your genre, and I'm talking about, romance, historical novel, science fiction, they'll know what to expect and understand what the central concept of your story is. Lastly, and you want to think practical here. Now, if you need help with publishing, get a hold of me at Mastering Presentation Secrets and working with the acquisition. Go through the process of finding editors, finding agents, finding book publishers who want to publish your creative work. Call to adventure of your protagonist is the center of where your log line that you pitch. And so for a movie, for example, you want to be able to have a short and succinct statement, probably like 2 sentences. If you need help with me, let me know and I'll show you how that works, because that's your pitch. It's a potential buyer, a quick cue as to what genre your story is. Now, this is obviously a dramatic piece, so that's going to be the log line, and that's the central part of it. Paul's going to be the center of the drama log line to pitch. The pitch has to give the potential buyer, that is an investor who wants to invest in your movie project, a quick cue, and this dramatic genre tells us what kind of conflict you pursue. Third and last here for this particular section, it begins the process of character development, because we're going to see Paul change over time throughout the 12 stages. Your protagonist's reaction to the call to venture will offer you that chance to begin to showcase the character development within your story. It's going to tell us who and what Paul is. And in this case, we're going to get an idea. The initial reaction will easily dictate the type of character they are at the beginning of the story. And what we see at the beginning, stage 2, is Paul's a homebody. He's a professor type. He's a quiet, introverted type, but he realizes he has to be more decisive and determined to take on the custody industry and the entire village that's trying to alienate his daughter from him. And that's important to see, because we're going to see the character development. All right, this is now stage 3. Stage 3 of the hero's journey is the refusal of the call. So what stage come next? That's the refusal of the call. The hero initially says, oh, wait a minute, now I can't take on the entire village. I can't take on the family court system by myself. Their hesitation, their fears, their insecurity could rise to the fore. And as readers and people who are seeing a movie along these lines, we begin to understand the character of the protagonist. I'm going to offer you 3 reasons why your protagonist should refuse a call to adventure and how your script or story can benefit from that refusal. So number 1, to create instant tension and conflict, or to say, all right, in this case, daughter is kidnapped. Well, shouldn't Paul immediately respond? But he goes, well, maybe not. The refusal can work with any type of cinematic story structure, narrative, creative work, novel, even one that doesn't hit all the marks of Campbell or Vogler heroes stages. And Vogler is the guy who adapted Joseph Campbell for Hollywood. Will Paul have the resources, the time, the money, all the things that he needs? Because in the novel, we find out that Anne, the wife, had taken everything, that is, had stripped the house, so all the assets were gone, went to the bank, cleaned out the bank account. So literally, Paul has $5.85 to his name. So it's like, okay, well, maybe I'm a little bit out of my element here. So everything is gone. Now what? Can Paul navigate that court maze, have enough funds to continue? Can he fight the good fight for the long haul? Number 2, to showcase the risks and the stakes involved. The best screenplay or novel creative work showcases big risks and big stakes the characters must overcome. In this case, get the daughter back to the marital home. But the refusal of the call to adventure offers you that opportunity to introduce how high the stakes are and how much Paul has to go through. All of those things that are very, very difficult. So he wants to be able to take care of the daughter's health and safety. He's forced to risk it all and transform his lifestyle, not spend any money, put everything into getting the daughter restored to the family home. Third, the last one here in this section, to create empathy and character depth. Any character can take on an adventure or handle conflict that's thrown at them. We've seen it time and time again in any action flick. So you think with an action genre, how somebody has to keep coming back again and again. There's all kinds of obstacles against them. But Paul is not a dynamic, extroverted, and social person, but a homebody and a primary caregiver. Now, what the reader gets to see, is he up to the challenge? Can he react quickly and explosively to the trauma that's he's experiencing? Stage Stage 4 of the hero's journey is meeting the mentor. So, along the way, the protagonist, your screenplay, your movie, your creative work, your novel may need a mentor. The hero encounters a mentor that can give them advice, wisdom, information, or items that make them ready for the journey that they have ahead. 3 things that the mentor character can do for your protagonist, your screenplay, creative work, or novel. 1, create an emotional, empathetic bond between characters. So these are the stories that have heart. You're seeing a person who needs help, needs assistance, and then they go to the mentor. What should I do? It could be a mother, a father, an older person, a sibling, anyone that would help the protagonist. And for a story to have this heart, the writer needs to create empathy for the characters. And Paul has several mentors throughout Burning America. He realizes that he cannot go it alone. So he looks for support from both of his attorneys. He has 2 in the novel, his sister and his mom. 2, guide the protagonist through the central conflict. When the protagonist is first introduced within their ordinary world, they're in a place of comfort or complacency. The best stories then take that character out of their comfort zone and throwing them into the metaphorical fire, that extreme conflict that rocks their world. So when Paul is kicked out of his ordinary world, he's thrown into this central conflict and seeks guidance in the wisdom of his family and attorneys. Sometimes the mentor isn't a character at all, but for Paul, his faith is a guide. So in great novels and great stories, let's say that you have someone like a Tom Wolfe or you have someone like a Jack London. Nature in some of those novels become a guide. In this case, faith is a guide for Paul. Number 3, help you introduce story elements, themes, and exposition within the screenplay, creative work, or novel. Paul doesn't know how to navigate the legal system, nor alone is he able to combat the entire custody industry and the village court that he's up against. His faith, his family, and attorneys will reveal possibilities and hope that he can survive. Now, this is available, there's a little plug there at Amazon. It's also at Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and Target if you want to get a copy of Burning America to see in some detail what I'm describing here. Stage 5. What is stage 5? That's crossing the threshold. At some point at the end of the first act, because there are 3 major acts in a screenplay or in a novel, the story may somehow showcase a moment where your protagonist needs to cross the threshold, and that is between their ordinary world and the special world that they'll be experiencing in their inner or outer journey begins. The inner journey is the psychological component, and the outer journey is what's actually happening, the action. The hero leaves their ordinary world for the first time and then crosses into the threshold. Adventure is coming. Here's our three ways crossing the threshold affects your story. Number 1, shifts the story into gear. So I'm old fashioned, I'm retro, I like a manual stick and always use that. So yeah, gets into gear. First gear, get you going. Second gear, get a little bit faster. And that's what we're doing. We're shifting into gear. If you've been introduced to your protagonist through their ordinary world and have watched them finally accept the call to adventure, which we've seen, whether it be an inner or outer, emotional or physical journey, it's always nice to offer a moment within the story that shifts everything to the next gear. And the readers or the viewers will come along with you. Initially, Paul engages with a father's rights attorney. This is where he sees this is the answer. I'm going to go to a father's rights attorney. Mom took off with the child, kidnapped. Easy to get that kid back to Pennsylvania. All's right with the world, right? Nope, doesn't happen. Paul gets into gear when the judge simply returns their child back to the mom. What? Say what? She's kidnapped, and then all of a sudden the judge just says, oh yeah, back to mom. Paul has to increase his efforts. The road to recovery is more precarious than he suspected. Number 2, introduces the differences between the ordinary world and the special world to come. That special world is now the world that the protagonist is about to come across as they deal with the conflict that they have been forced to or reluctantly chosen to take on. And it's vital to the story to present a world that's very different from the protagonist is used to. So this is pretty common in science fiction, for example. We see everything well and good on Earth, and all of a sudden There's a cataclysmic event, the comets come, the aliens come. So we're used to seeing it, let's say, in science fiction. Great stories simply showcase a window of time within the character's world. But if you want to really engage a reader and an audience, you need to inject as much tension and, as I always emphasize, conflict as you can. And you do that by taking them out of their element, taking them out of their ordinary world. So Paul's ordinary world as a primary caregiver to their child is over. That's done. The special world in Burning America is the custody industry and parental alienation. Paul is out of his elements. Number 3 begins the protagonist's character arc. And an arc means that here's where the character begins and will travel through emotionally and physically throughout the telling of the story. So character arcs are a must. Most people want to see a character change throughout a story. There's a transformation. Something happens as they undergo and they take on the conflict at hand. When the protagonist physically or emotionally crosses a threshold, you're letting the reader audience know this is the beginning of the character arc. And so the readers or the viewers are saying, where are they going to end up? Where are they going? Paul, in this case, in Burning America, runs into a corrupt cop, a slanderous neighbor, lying and incompetent psychs and counselors, and a Kafkaesque court system. How will Paul possibly survive all of that? The participants must be invested in his plight, and you need to show the viewers or the readers of your creative work that. Stage 6 of the hero's journey. Stage 6 are tests, allies, and enemies. And it's within this unknown and this special world that the protagonist faces many tests and meets their allies and enemies. Number 1, tests. Within the hero's journey structure, this stage is a vital part of your protagonist's journey. Conflict, I've said this before, I'll say it again. It's like in real estate, right? Location, location, location. In a creative work, conflict, conflict, conflict. It's everything. Without a conflict, no story arc, no character exploration. So while this stage is represented in every hero's journey structure application, it's also a necessary component that any story that you tell using the hero's journey structure or not. Your story doesn't merely entail a character dealing with a single conflict. They're going to keep coming at you and coming at you and coming at you. Paul has an obvious test. How does he get the daughter returned to the family home? But is that it? Nope. Paul has to navigate the custody court, the machinations of the legal system, an ongoing test to endure dealing with each one of these barriers. Number 2, similar to a mentor, he has allies. Along with the tests that your protagonists face, they're going to need some help along the way, and that's where you introduce allies. So initially, both of Paul's attorneys seem like likely allies, father's rights attorney, and then a really high-powered and also a feminist attorney. They seem like they're going to be really coming to Paul's aid. How reliable they are and how long they last, though, will be questionable. And that's what we see throughout Burning America. Paul's mom, family, and dad and sister will prove to be reliable allies. Perhaps even the small child, Holy Communion age Katrin, can be viewed as an ally despite her youth. Number 3, enemies. The mention of enemies would come full circle within the hero's journey stage. Enemies are there to test the protagonist. They offer that necessary conflict that should be present in all the stories. While allies give us and the protagonist hope, the enemies are the ones that go against that and challenge that hope and create a more enthralling and involving plot. Now, it might seem obvious that Paul, Anne's wife, is an enemy. She's the one who kidnapped the child, right? But is that it? Nope. In Burning America, there's an intriguing Selena character. So what antagonist role does she play? Many stories feature an antagonist, but Paul has at least 2, Anne and Selena, not to mention additional enemies in the village court system and hostility that he has to face head on. Number 7, stage 7 of the hero's journey, the approach. Here for the approach, it allows the audience and protagonist to catch their breath. So there's a cave that represents the core element of your story's conflict. It can be a physical place, like a tower holding a princess, a dungeon holding a captive, a vault containing the Ark of the Covenant, some things that you may know from films and other creative works, or a weak point in a world-destroying Death Star. But once you put your protagonist through all these tests and they met their allies and enemies, they're going to need to approach the inmost cave of the story that's preparing to face their greatest fears and conflicts. And this is like sort of a respite. So after we've seen a lot of conflict, you put the protagonist in the cave, so a moment of peace. But what they're doing is preparing themselves mentally and physically for the next stage. Here we feature 3 ways in which to approach the inmost cave, what can better and strengthen any story. Paul seems to catch his breath with a feminist attorney, right? So he has the father's rights attorney first, then Deborah, the feminist attorney, because he's doing just the opposite. First, I'm going to try the father's rights attorney, then I'm going to go to a feminist attorney. She certainly will be able to advocate for me, right? Paul's attorney has a plan of attack, and Deborah's boy, because this is a psychiatrist who's been paid off. Paul thinks, got it made now. So a little bit of respite from the conflict. 2, it offers a time to reflect, review, and plan ahead. At this point, a lot's happened since your story first started. You've introduced your protagonist in their ordinary world, and that world has been rocked by a conflict they are forced to face. They have reservations about facing the conflict, but they've decided, after all, this is the path I have to take. They cross the threshold away from comforts of their world and into the world of conflict, the special world, and they're now destined to face. And when they have a lot of tests, emotional, physical, or both, or some sort of combination. And they've met many characters that either helped or hindered their journey to the first initial cave of their conflict. The approach allows them to catch their breath and, more importantly, prepare for the conflict they're about to face. In this case, Paul did not do well with the first attorney, father's rights attorney, nor the first psychiatrist. But now I'm going to regroup, reflect, and review, plan for success. Paul, in his mind, in this cave section, thinks he's got it made. Psychiatrist is on board and paid for. Best attorney in the region, feminist attorney now works for Paul. Oh, a sigh of relief. All is going to be fine. But 3 escalates the tension and builds anticipation. Now we're going to say, what's going to come next? The ultimate tool to keep readers and audiences invested, tension and anticipation. You're going to play with their emotions. You tease them. You offer possibilities of failure or success and try to sell the reader audience on the notion that each of them is possible. The approach to the inmost cave stage allows you to build that anticipation and tension to its highest level because you're intensifying what is about to happen, because you're opening the floodgates and the raging waters of their actions and reactions conflict and crash into what they're actually facing. What you're really doing is escalating the tension by showcasing the many conflicts they'll be facing and building anticipation by introducing their approach, forcing the reader audience to wonder and think, I expect all of this to work. But will it? That's what they're thinking. The approach to the inmost cave stage within any story, following all steps of the hero's journey and not, is an essential element of your narrative. It's allowing the reader, audience, and characters to catch their breath, reflect, review, plan ahead for this big conflict that they know is just over the horizon, and allows you, the writer, to build that necessary tension and anticipation that you need going into the midpoint of your story. At this point in Burning America, Paul, he seems to have wrestled the tiger to the ground. He's got it. He appears to have events well in hand. The reader should feel the tension, expecting a positive resolution and anticipation towards a successful conclusion. But of course, in Burning America, with this tension, is that it? Stage 8. Stage 8 is the ordeal. Everything within the first act, beginning of the second, builds up to the ordeal, which is the first real conflict that the protagonist must face. What is the ordeal? It's the midpoint of your story where your protagonist faces their greatest conflict yet. The protagonist has gone through all the necessary trials and tribulations that have prepared them for what they believe will be the ultimate test, their journey so far, the ordeal. As they approach the inmost cave of their story, we've learned everything they need to know about how they plan to handle that situation. But once they begin their approach, everything goes haywire. Paul thought, oh, got everything made. No, unexpected setbacks occur. What they thought they knew was either wrong, misinterpreted, or evolved into a far more difficult conflict than they ever could have imagined. At this point in the story, the protagonist and their allies, Fanny, face their greatest challenge thus far, usually amid even greater consequences than what we've seen earlier. Sometimes it's life or death. Other times it's a metaphorical version of those strikes. But when the protagonist hits rock bottom, making them, as well as the reader, audience, feel as though they're at the dark end of their days. There's 3 ways that you can create the best ordeal within your story. 1, write the ordeal as if it were the climax. So for those of us who are enjoying the story, we think this is it. But just because the ordeal is the midpoint of your story doesn't mean you can't pack a punch. In essence, the ordeal is a false climax. We expect a resolution. We think this is going to happen happily. Nope. It appears as though Paul's ordeal is at the end. Best attorney in town, feminist attorney, best psychiatrist paid off in his pocket, and surely Katrin, the kidnapped daughter, will be home to stay soon. 2, kill the protagonist's darlings. Now, what do we mean by these darlings? Allies and mentors are the rock for most protagonists. They offer that emotional and physical support. Mentors offer the hero the knowledge and perspective that they need to take on whatever conflict they're forced to face. The ordeal is about taking your protagonist to the lowest of their lows so that they can rise up and be resurrected in such a way that they can handle the major conflict that's coming once and for all. And what greater way to take them as low as they can go than killing their allies and mentors? It turns out, in this case, that the character, Dr. Kitchen, still called Deborah's boy, and there's a chapter about Deborah's boy in the novel, and her paid-off psyche does not react realistically to Katrin's love of her dad. Ooh, how does that hurt? The child's illustration on the cover of Burning America show us what she drew, and dad as the primary caregiver, cradling her in his arms while mom stands off abstractly to the side. But Paul loses again, and his darlings, Deborah's boy, the psych who's been paid off, and Deborah, the feminist attorney, no help at all. So if you look at the cover, you're going to see this is a very important illustration that really shows you something key about Burning America. 3, gives opportunities within the ordeal for the protagonist to be resurrected. 2 heroes' journey stages away from the ordeal is the resurrection. Just like in the Bible, the climax where the hero faces their final test using everything they've learned to take on the conflict once and for all. And within that resurrection, your protagonist needs to have a moment of transformation. But before that transformation can occur, we have to get them to push them to the lowest point, that brink of where they are losing allies and mentors that can help set the stage for them to transform so they can handle that final test. In fact, we need more. We need to pull the reader or viewer into the creative work. They need to lose hope, courage, or strength. And remember, Paul is someone who is a faithful person, so it could be a lack of faith or a loss of faith in his good story. Reader and audience need to feel as if there's no returning to the ordinary world because that's how bad things are. And the feminist attorney, Deborah, she's about to bail out just when Paul sees light that a custody trial is coming, something that he's been working for, just about to begin. He documented everything that he could. He had all the records placed, struggled for over 3 years. But now Deborah informs him, oh, by the way, I'm leaving town. I'm taking off. What? Paul demurs walking into court with Deborah's successor, a man. He knows he's trying to get into a court with more sympathy using a feminist attorney, but now he's going to walk in with a man. Paul's going to know he's going to get railroaded if he walks into a court with a man representing him. Stage 9, the reward. After your hero's gone through all this ordeal, you may want or need to reward them with something so they can take to use on the final threat they face during the climax of the story. And in this case, there's 5 types of rewards, depending on the genre and depending on what you have in mind for your protagonist to prevail at the end of their journey. A special weapon. So this, again, this is very common in fantasy films. This is very common in fantasy novels, science fiction, a special weapon. So if you're in the genre of action, science fiction, a thriller, or fantasy, the character may need a special weapon. And in this case, Joseph Campbell referred to as the sword to defeat their greatest conflict. And this physical manifestation can be used in other genres, but it's more prevalent in action and adventure type. Number 2, an elixir. An elixir is that magical or medicinal portion that can heal a wounded ally or land. And during the peak of the story, the hero in the journey usually finds themselves in peril. It's the lowest of the lows, but then the elixir is given them so they can heal themselves or their land to prevail in the end. Paul's elixir, he does have one, is participating in Roman Catholic Mass and imbibing the blood of the Christ in the Eucharist. Paul is fighting for Katrin before her first Holy Communion, and there's the theme there. We come back to it. And when should be strengthened by the elixir for the initial time. This raises the stakes for the conflict. 3, knowledge. Knowledge is often mightier than any sword. It can be a fantastic tool to acquire to defeat a foe. It can drive a protagonist's internal need to succeed. It can inform them of information, something that they need to solve the riddle or a device for a plan of attack in an action film. In Burning America, Paul obtains knowledge from his 2 attorneys, his family, in particular his mother and sister, and perhaps more arguably, even from the Holy Communion age, Katrin, confirmation age, and a child who's coming into that is imbibing knowledge according to doctrine. Knowledge allows him to proceed as he succeeds or carries on the fight towards a return of getting Katrin home. 4 is experience. Sometimes the protagonists have an experience or event that opens their eyes and gives them the confidence that they need to prevail. To a lesser extent, but still present and relevant in Burning America, is the experience that Paul enjoys to encourage him from time to time throughout his ordeal. Reconciliation. When a protagonist reconciles with a love interest, as we see so often in romantic comedies and love stories, that reward can help them to conquer any emotional conflict that they've been facing. And this reward is another outstanding option for dramatic stories, but it can work within genre flicks as well. The reward offers the protagonist that added boost they need to propel themselves through the conflict they face at the climax of the story, where they're facing their biggest challenge and the toughest challenge, emotional or physical. So a special weapon, an elixir, knowledge, or experience. Reconciliation of the 5 types of rewards that heroes need to prevail. So when you're thinking of the illustration that I was describing, here is the illustration on the cover of Burning America, and you can see this is the one that when the paid-off psych sees it, he actually rules against Paul. Now, I wonder which one is Paul. Obviously, it's the one on the right side because it's got a beard, and that beard is then holding the baby who is smiling, and the mom stands distractedly and abstractly off to the side. When the psych sees this, what does he do? He awards custody to the mother. What? The child was asked to draw an illustration of where she feels most loved, most at home, and who she wants to be with. This was quite a surprise. And so it's a key element in Burning America. Stage 10 of the hero's journey. This is the road back. So once they've attained the reward, it's time to go for the hero to get on the road back to their ordinary world. And this is the stage to develop your 3rd act as we begin to wind down the stories, but with more conflict and higher stakes. The road back is the moment of your screenplay or story that leads your character towards the final climax, and they have survived the ordeal, which is that midpoint of the story, gained that special weapon, elixir, piece of knowledge, eye-opening experience, or some sort of reconciliation that will help them in the final conflict so they can go back to their ordinary world. This is the launching point of your 3rd act. You transition from the second and venture into the final stretch of your protagonist's journey. Your ordeal is the first major conflict they face, usually written as a false climax where we think the story is about to end up and well and resolve. Doesn't happen. Things change and more conflict evolve. The road back is where the protagonist sees the light at the end of the tunnel, but faces yet another challenge, however, with even higher stakes. In Burning America, the ordeal and the false climax is when Paul thinks the second psychiatrist and the feminist attorney will get Katrin home, but they do not. Now Paul faces a custody trial knowing that mothers win 92% of contested custody cases. What chance does Paul have? The ordeal is not over. The stacked against him, and the obstacles are even bigger. Paul loses his favored feminist attorney and a second antagonist, Selena. Remember, the second antagonist, in addition to Anne, emerges as a countervailing force against Paul. Moreover, Anne reveals serious health issues which will complicate proceedings. So you can see as we get into the third act here, more conflict, more tension, more issues rise to the fore, showing the light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes there's a slight lull in the action or conflict between the ordeal and the road back, moment or sequence where the protagonist regroups with their allies and their thoughts are collected into that continued hurdles and obstacles they face. This offers the reader and audience a chance to regroup and breathe after the action or drama of the ordeal. And you want to give the characters some sort of accomplishment or hope. So something comes their way so that they feel a little bit better. And just like you think you should as a good writer, throw even more conflict at them because they're about to believe that their journey is almost complete. And if you watch films, this is often what happens. You'll feel the shift within the story to the point where it feels as though we've turned a page from the second act to the third. Facing a custody trial, Paul has a bit of light in the character of Clarissa, who is Deborah's assistant and a female attorney to keep him on a level playing field during the custody proceedings. So a little bit of light comes in, a little bit of hope. But we're setting up the third act. And if there's a specific purpose that writers are looking for considering this stage, it's about to be setting up for the third act. The hero has faced the ordeal, experienced the biggest conflict of their journey. Now they've managed to survive it. But we flip that page to the third act by introducing more conflict, upping the stakes. And even more important, we want to understand what's at risk going into the third eventual climax. That's the resurrection. The road back stage of the story structure allows you that opportunity to reset and show us what has changed. That's the character arc, how it affects the protagonist and their allies, and what they have to overcome to prevail at the end. Paul has to overcome Selena, have proper representation for the custody trial, and grasp that judge declares the war is over. No more conflict, according to the judge, or else everybody's going to jail. Paul will face even more serious consequences. So when we get to stage 11, this is the resurrection. It's it, just like in the Bible, 1 Corinthians 15. The climax of your hero's journey encompasses the resurrection stage. What does that stage entail, and how and what does it have to do with your hero's resurrection? It begins with the highest of stakes. Everything's on the line now. If you've employed the road back stage of the hero's journey within your story, you've done the necessary work to set up the high stakes. There's no mistake about this. The climax of your story has to have your protagonist dealing with the highest stakes they've ever experienced previously, even though we've had other conflicts before. The final showdown, the big fight, the emotional confrontation, everything that the protagonists have been preparing for throughout their entire journey has led up to this final moment or sequence. How about Paul's resurrection? Deborah, his attorney, is called to an emergency meeting. What could this be about? She was about to go out of town. Paul has no idea, but Selena, the neighbor and the antagonist, goes along with Anne, and Paul's wife is awarded custody? What? The neighbor gets the kid? How could this be? For 3.5 years, Paul has been battling Anne, the custody industry of judges, attorneys, the psychs, the village court, but now with absolutely no examination of her background, neither Paul or Anne, but the neighbor, Selena, walks off with the child. Whoa, we got a story here, folks. Okay, the hero is resurrected. The best type of story showcases a character, that arc that culminates to a real transformation. If you follow the stages of the hero's journey within your story, there's a reason that we show the protagonist in their ordinary world to start. We need to see the beginning of their arc. And remember, it's what we saw at the very beginning. Paul's transformed from a confused, quiet, introverted professor type father to a battling machine. He'll get his child, Katrin, restored whole and home. Catharsis is key because definitely this is a novel based on catharsis. Cinematic or creative catharsis, that feeling we get after the resolution of the story and the protagonist's overall journey. And you've experienced it when you've watched a movie, read a screenplay, saw a story, maybe read a novel, and you walked out of that theater and you closed that script and you felt truly changed or affected somehow. And that's the magic of a fantastic story, leaving the reader and audience truly touched, affected, and sometimes changed. Catharsis. The import of Burning America is catharsis. We travel the road that Paul tried from his ordinary world that he tread as a primary caregiver to a triumphant father. Paul inherits the Prize family record, relic a 1957 Buick Special, and Paul's arc is complete. 2 generations, Paul and Katrin's, are whole. We finally get to that point. Stage 12, the last stage. Okay. The return, the climax of the hero's journey encompasses the resurrection stage. And once they accomplish that, you have your protagonist return to their ordinary world. There's 3 reasons why your hero should make that return. Number 1, you want to have the story come full circle. The reader and the audience are in this ride with your protagonist. They've been along all the way. They empathize with them. The story creates a cathartic reaction. We want to see the story resolve. We want to witness some closure so that we know the character's journey has ended. So what better way to accomplish that? Letting them go back to their ordinary world to either flaunt their success or show people how they've changed for the better. At the beginning of Burning, Paul was primary caregiver to their child, Katrin. In the return stage, Paul is reunited to Katrin, and she is made whole by returning to the loving arms of her father, but only after Paul faced and overcame the ordeal stage. So Burning America, and this is at a local restaurant here in San Diego, and it's very American and very patriotic, and I like that picture. Number 2, complete the character arc. When we follow a character for a long time, we want to see their character grow, to change, to better themselves. That's the character arc. It offers the reader and audience a sense of closure and catharsis. When we put the protagonist back into their ordinary world, it makes the reader and the audience wonder how they react. How have they changed? Will they fall into the same pattern they were when they were introduced within their ordinary world? Will Paul then become an introvert again, very quiet, reserved, or has he learned that he has to battle the demons that are against him? Paul is wiser to the world after the ordeal. Now he knows the score. The last line of the story concludes how Paul is ready to parent Katrin in single parenting freedom. He's no longer subject to the restrictions of the court, his deceased wife, Serena the neighbor, or the legal system. Paul is free, and he is restored now to Katrin, back to the marital home. So, good story, just like any other story, like Paul Revere's Ride. All of those things that allow the reader and the audience to live vicariously, because catharsis is so vital to that experience. That's why people go to the movies or read good stories. The hero returns to their ordinary world triumphant, which offers the reader, the audience, to feel the glory of that return. And if it's not glory, it's at least a sense of calm, knowing that everything is going to be okay for the character that they have lived vicariously through. The last song closing out the novel summarizes the journey has been on. The Ian Hunter song, there's also a book, On Track, Ian Hunter, available on Amazon. Yours truly wrote it. In tones, we've been living in purgatory, and anything's better than this. Paul and Katrin return. He's united, back in their home. Everything's going to be fine. The ordeal has been overcome. There is a tragic death, but Paul will return Katrin to her ordinary world of stability and love. Katrin enjoys the elixir of life during her first Holy Communion. Their lives are now characterized by peace and calm. Amazing, right? So there are the 12 stages, Burning America, which is available, of course, on Amazon, and you can pick up a copy and also enjoy that, because what we've seen through the 12 stages of the hero's journey is really being able to see and to experience all of the things that we have been able to see throughout the novel. Burning America, available on Amazon, the 12 stages of the hero's journey in Burning America, in the best interest of the children, with a question mark. Hope you've enjoyed that. And of course, if you want to know how you can do this for yourself, well, of course, what we're able to do is always to show you how this can be done and where you can find out how to do this yourself, because we also want to be able to show you in the way that will help you throughout your story, creative writing, whatever you might like to do, screenplay, podcast, presentation, whatever you can do. So private Facebook group, Mastering Presentation Secrets, that is available and also can help you with these kinds of issues, the 12 stages of the hero's journey. Give me a call, join the Facebook group, and I'll be able to help you as well if you want to be able to do better with your creative writing, have a better presentation, somehow show yourself best foot forward, how you can be the best that you can be when it comes to a creative work, a novel, screenplay, whatever it might be. Join me there. Pick up a copy of the novel. You'll be able to see this for yourself. And if you want information, of course, reach out to me. This is the Doctor of Digital, hoping that you enjoyed the 12 stages of the hero's journey as much as I did, because I certainly enjoyed it. Until next time, and the next type of things that you'll be able to enjoy, this is the Doctor of Digital signing out. Until next time, Deus Vult.